Good evening and welcome to the Vault sessions on this lovely Tuesday evening with me, G. Let's get straight into that intro. So as I said, good evening and welcome to the Vault sessions. Thank you firstly to Monty for helping me out with that intro for this Vault sessions. That is the intro to the show. So let me know in comments if you liked it. But if you are joining us, evening Mazza, evening Healing Art. Great to see you guys along, and to Stealth Andy, who I think I know that is, but I'm going to check in just a while if it is who I think it is. Yes. So basically, welcome to the Vault sessions. I'm sorry there's been some complications over the last couple of weeks, some technical issues. Hopefully I'm coming through fine tonight. Let me know in comments if the stream is all good and everything is looking great. But yes, there's been some complications. So there's been some weird things going on. We missed the live with Ben from the 401 files last week, but then that interview has been uploaded onto the channel. So if you haven't seen that one, you can still go and see the interview where I sat down and had a session with Ben from the 401 files. If this is your first time along to the channel, please, give us some support and subscribe and like. And basically, if you're into ufology, cryptids, this is the place for you. Anything paranormal, you'll get to enjoy on this Vault channel. So yeah, give us a subscribe and hit that notification bell. So you guys haven't come along to see me. You've come along to see the special guest that I've got for the Vault session this evening. I am so pleased to introduce this person who is not only an author, but also a public speaker and lecturer on his expertise subject. He is a national podcaster. If there is something that needs to be known about cryptids, about beasts here on the UK or around the world, this is our guy. So welcome along to the Vault sessions, Andy McGrath. I'm just going to unmute you there, Andy.
Oh, great. Hi, G. How you doing? Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm doing really, really well. And I am super, super happy to be meeting you. We obviously just had a quick chat off air just before we got started, but this is genuinely the first time we've kind of virtually met, and so I can't thank you enough for coming along this evening and supporting these sessions. It's going to be absolutely brilliant to get to know you a little bit better and what you've been doing in your field, and just some of the interesting stuff that you've got to share.
Sure.
Just to mention to everybody that is watching, this is your session as much as it is ours. So if you've got any burning questions for Andy, put them in comments and I will highlight them and bring them up onto the screen, just like this one, and you'll be able to see your question and we'll ask Andy to answer your question. So you play a big part in this, guys. So yeah, think about all those questions you want to ask Andy. So Andy, are you Stealth Andy Stealth?
No.
No,
I'm not.
Oh,
no,
right.
I'm not Stealth Andy Stealth. No, I'm just.
Right.
I couldn't possibly multitask the comments plus talking to you at the same time. It's way out of my remit.
No, I'm sure you. I've been watching some of your videos. I've seen you multitasking, so
Yeah, but that's all in the editing. They make it look that way. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Right. Well, cool. So, again, I'm just going to go straight into some questions that I've got that I'm burning to ask you, Andy, and then we'll hopefully get some questions from our viewers this evening and the guys that have come along to watch. If you are watching pre-recorded, don't you can still put your questions to Andy in the comments, and I'm sure Andy will keep an eye on this video. And if he doesn't see the question, I'll try and bring it to him and get an answer for you guys. So, if you're watching back on pre-recorded. Hey, so I just want to start at the beginning, Andy, and I guess I wanted to ask you, when and why did you become interested in cryptids and monsters? Where did
Um,
it all start?
it started as a teenager. I can't remember the exact time, but it was an early teenager, and I was watching reruns of things like the things I'd seen as a child, like the In Search of series with Leonard Nimoy, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World that had great stuff about crystal skulls and Ogopogo and other creatures like the Sasquatch. I just got interested. I thought, wow, is there a possibility that there are some animals out there still left to find? And as the years went on, I would collect newspaper clippings, and then later, as the internet came in, get involved in forums and chat rooms and all that stuff that people used to do, talking about sightings that people had had. And I became really, really enamored with it. I thought, wow, people are actually coming on here, sometimes very genuinely, sometimes not, and claiming to see these things in the modern day. We're not just talking about folklore, old dragon lore from the medieval times. We're talking about
Yeah,
people in the modern day who think they've seen something they can't explain. And many of the things that they were describing in my area, in cryptozoology, seemed to be animals, animals that we didn't know about yet or we hadn't classified. I thought, well, what if that could be real? And it was always a passing interest. I was a musician in my past life, and this thing happened in the background. And then I got married, came to London, had a family, worked 50-hour weeks in the city
mm,
for years and years with a 3-hour, daily round trip commute. And when I turned 40, which is in 2016, my my wife would just saved a little money, from having no lives and working constantly. And she said, "Why don't we do like our pet projects or something? Just take a few years off, or maybe a year was the plan." And I said, "Okay, what are you going to do?" And she did her thing, and um, she said to me, "Well, what about this monsters thing you're always talking about? Your monsters." I was like, "Okay, I guess I could do something like that." And then initially, I had planned to make it a TV series. But a friend of mine who was in TV said, "Well, look, you don't really have any experience here, and if you just forward this idea to some execs, if it's a good idea, they're just gonna steal it. Why don't you write a book, and then at least the concept, the name, all of that stuff is yours, and it's very hard to just take that thing from you." And I'd never written a book, but I used to be a lyricist and a songwriter, so I thought, well, just use some of those skills. And I wrote a book, and I called it Beasts of Britain. But even before the
mhm.
book was done, I immediately, right from the start, started blogging it, chapters of it, and also interviewing right away. Some American podcaster got in touch and said, "Will you talk about the British Bigfoot?" And I said, "Okay, fine." And it just spiraled. So for the first year, sort of late 2016 to mid 2017, when the book came out, the first version, I was blogging it and also interviewing. I must have done about 50 interviews about the book before it even happened and it arrived. And it just kind of spiraled from there. I'm on my third version of sorry, shameless plug, Beasts of Britain, third and final version, and also my
Yeah, great.
sorry once again, Beasts of the World. That's a new 7-part series I've just started, and yeah, I'm talking, I'm speaking, I'm currently pitching a TV series where the producer of Monster Quest, Doug Freicheck,
Wow.
we're working together. We've not sold it yet, but we're in the meetings. We're pushing hard, and we think we might be able to get it done. So if we do get it done, we'll have a cryptid series that's international, that goes around the world to look at cryptids you've never heard of, meet researchers nobody knows about, stuck without praise, without reward, in
Mhm.
some jungle somewhere, looking at some odd creature nobody's ever been interested in because it's not Sasquatch or Nessie.
Well, it
And
sounds really exciting, and I just want to say right now that I have some experience in front of the camera. If you need any help, no, I'm just joking. I'm
oh
just
yeah,
joking.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, what
it
we
sounds
do,
really
because
exciting.
yeah, yeah. I was
We've
just going to say the
I
stories will look at researchers. We will meet researchers all over the world, so it's perfect. Actually, it's something to celebrate the cryptid community and their obsession with their
yes,
individual
and
creatures.
definitely it's not as expansive, I would say, here in the UK as it is, maybe in other countries around the world, and especially like the US. So the more we can celebrate it, the better, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've got some really interesting questions already come in,
Oh
even
wow,
into the guys that have joined along as well. Hi, Dan. But we had a really interesting question from Healing Heart. I don't know if you can see that on the screen,
I can
Andy.
see that. Yeah.
Well, I'd really like to know whether Bigfoot is physical or paranormal or both.
Now,
So,
one healing heart is happening upon there is actually a tear in the fabric of all Bigfoot researchers. And there's I call them two warring camps. They're not warring camps, but there is the flesh and blood camp and what is called or known as the Woo, WOO, the Woo, which is paranormal Bigfoot research. A lot of people, very serious people actually, with scientific backings and people who've otherwise believed in a flesh and blood creature for many many years now have come over to this side where they think it must be a paranormal creature. I was even talking to Wes Jimmer from Sasquatch Chronicles very recently, and he surprised me by saying, and he had a flesh and blood experience with three Sasquatch. That's his big experience that started his journey into this
mhm.
world. And he said that he now believes it could possibly be a paranormal creature, which shocked me because I'm in the flesh and blood camp completely. Now, it's not that I don't believe there isn't a paranormal in life or there isn't some other realm outside of our physicality. I just think, from my perspective, I'm looking for unknown animals. So, had I heard details about the okapi before its discovery in the forests of the Congo, I wouldn't have considered for a moment speculating on whether or not it was immaterial or
Mhm.
a paranormal animal. I'm looking for a creature. That's a creature that looks like a giraffe with a short neck and zebra legs, and two short horns. I'm looking for a creature. And that's the same thing with me with Nessie or Sasquatch and some other things which stray slightly into the I'm not sure if they are or they're not category, and perhaps Black Shuck or something like that, or
Mhm.
the Dog Man. Oh, I've got a theory on that. But I'm still in the flesh and blood. And I'd say Healing Heart, disappointingly for some, I think it's a flesh and blood creature.
Well, that's the thing that it might be disappointing for some, but it's at least an honest answer. I mean, it's very much the same of how I feel, because I think Healing Heart is talking when she mentions paranormal, that certainly something that's evolved in the last decade or so is the UFO connection or the alien connection with Bigfoot, and that's something that I've been talking a lot about recently that I'm going to start exploring a little bit more. I haven't thus far, and the reason why I guess I haven't thus far is because there's not a great, well, certainly in the research that I've done, there's not a great deal of evidence, strong evidence that kind of helps support that theory.
Mm.
But that's also, when you think about what we're saying there, how do you find that evidence? Because people are talking about potentially, um, you know, um, the words gone off me, portals, etc.,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
can appear through and disappear into. And how do you quantify a portal, like, other than capturing it on video footage? It's not something that would be solid, so there's a lot of things around that side of the phenomenon, I guess, that
yeah.
would be very hard to find quantifiable evidence. So, but it is something that I'm going to explore a little bit more. But it's
I
really
think it's
interesting
very
to get
worthy.
your yeah, yeah. Well, I think all researchers, but I think before you discount something, as an open-minded researcher a little bit, to kind of have a more informed decision process.
No, absolutely. I think, although I've got an opinion, or really, you could say, um, a research philosophy, sort of an angle at which I'm heading towards. I'm trying to find specifically creatures that have not yet been classified by science, or creatures that were thought to have become extinct. For instance, that would cover the Nessie plesiosaur theory, for example, and bring those things to light either through anecdotal reports, physical evidence, or the golden prize, as it were, a specimen, or irrefutable video evidence of a flesh and blood creature. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in, but I don't discount the other stuff, because largely in the cryptozoology community, we mostly survive on anecdotal reports. That's the main basis of our evidence. There are other soft evidences like the footprints, of course, and hair and other things that we can find, but it's mostly anecdotal, as is most of the ufology and the paranormal side of things. And even when you've got your ghost hunters wandering through a building there with the EMFs, it's still anecdotal for the most part. We're trusting the person that's telling us the story to telling the truth, and we're taking them seriously and saying, okay, I'll investigate your serious report, as if you've just told me an actual thing that has happened in reality. And that's a difficult thing, and that actually sometimes is the only dividing line between all of those genres, is which one we're willing to take seriously when we get the anecdotal reports. I once said to somebody that one man's dog man is another man's Bigfoot. So for me, the dog man is very hard to quantify as a real flesh and blood creature from a biological perspective. But to some normie I'm talking to Bigfoot about, that sounds really hard to believe in as well. That's quite a stretch. So that's a stretch for them, and dog man is a stretch for me. And yet we're all on the same path, really.
Yeah. There's another great question from Stealth Andy there. With all the relevant information you have, how old do you think they are? Now, I think he is possibly asking how long have they been around, or how long. Just if you wouldn't mind clarifying, Andy, are you asking how long they live for, or how long they've been around, as in on the planet? But yeah, cool question. I actually wanted to ask you, Andy, a couple of questions about your books, and but just with what you were just saying there, you've also made a question pop into my mind, which is more relevant to what we were just talking about. So I think I'll throw that one in first. And that question was, do you have you read a lot of the or had a lot of involvement with the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, the BFRO?
Only in as far as, no, I mean, I've obviously read lots of their reports, and when I've been looking at areas,
that's kind of what I mean.
Especially, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Cliff and Bobo quite well, who I know are they only really attached to the organization through the Finding Bigfoot series. I don't know Matt really at all, but I think it's a very valid. I mean, it was one of the first organizations to start quantifying that kind of information. And in the early days, it was and still is a great resource, for sightings and mapping out great locations around the US.
Yeah. The only reason why I asked the question is because I myself have also certainly recently been reading a lot of the reports, both historical and really current, that you can access on their website. But what's really interesting is the people that go on and do that and make those reports, which are more from I guess an official way, because the BFRO is the biggest organization, one of the biggest in the States. So people that are going and leaving those reports obviously want to do it very official, but a lot of those reports, I've never really seen anybody talking in those reports about portals or
very rare.
And again, Yeah, and that's so. What would be really interesting if anybody is out there that's watching this show that lives anywhere in the world where wild men have been seen and sighted and reported. The BFRO isn't just for the States. You can report a sighting of Almasty or the UK wildman if you want to, but for those of you out there who do believe in more of the paranormal or have had experiences, I would really urge and encourage you to go and leave an official report, because it would start helping more to the evidence and research, I guess, right, Andy?
I think so as well. And what you just asked there actually really brought up a question that's always in my mind about perspective and philosophy, and that's our outlook on life. So, in the Western world at the moment, we're sort of in the situation where we have this religious void in our lives now, because that was a big part of all of our ancestors' lives until very, very recently. And then that's been removed, but there's nothing that's really replaced it. So we all tend to replace it with an interest or a passion, maybe a religion as well, but also mostly a passion or an interest. And our philosophy on life often plays out within that passion and interest. So sometimes these perspectives on, is Bigfoot, something paranormal? Is Bigfoot something flesh and blood? Is Bigfoot something to do with aliens? When we've not experienced it ourselves and not had those direct experiences, I think can often fall into those categories of, what is my philosophy and how would I like to believe in this thing, or what beliefs would I like to have about this thing. And I saw this play out a few times with myself and my wife. I'm a Christian by religion. My wife is a Jew by religion. We've both had sometimes the same exact experience, and our religions aren't too dissimilar to each other, but come away with quite a different perspective of what that experience was from a religious point of view. And that really showed me something. I was like, aha, okay. So we definitely just experienced the same thing there, and yet not just from an individual person point of view, but from two people who've grown up with two religious, um, what would I say, grounding philosophies beneath our
Yeah.
life, have now that they've influenced what we've just seen or experienced. That taught me a big lesson. Sometimes it's that philosophy and this desire for something to be within the parameters of what we would like the universe to be about that affects us. Sorry for the garbled explanation, but that, I think
Well,
it's
no,
something to consider.
I think it's a sort of philosophy that, knowing Healing Heart and some of the comments that I've heard from Healing Heart, she would agree. Okay, so going back to Stealth Andy's question, he did come back to us and confirm that he was asking how long they've been around. So,
Yeah.
how long do you think that they've been around? But just before we get the answer from Andy to Andy's question, please, guys, don't forget to like this stream if you're enjoying it. Really does help. And as I said at the beginning of the show, please subscribe if you haven't done so already. So Andy's question, how long have they been around? How long do you think they've been around? I mean, we don't want to take this whole session talking about Bigfoot and wild men,
No,
but
sure.
this will be the last question that we'll do on this one.
Okay.
But yeah, how long do you think they've been around?
Well, obviously I don't know. You would assume that they've always been with us, but within Britain, for example, there's amazing carvings on cathedrals and churches, as well as statues, as well as tapestries and beautiful embroidery on medieval, going back to the 12th century, medieval churches, cathedrals, and tapestries featuring the woodwows or the wild men, which show very, very clearly upright, bipedal, hairy hominoids. Now, there is a possibility that these could be a representation of, like, for instance, like a forest spirit, or maybe Heracles. They're often club carrying, for example. So it could be the god Heracles, could be the god Sylvanus, the shepherd god. And yet, there's something so similar to our modern day wild man in those medieval tapestries and statues and wood carvings on our holy places, that I think that we can say, at least in Europe, we've been aware of them since around about that time, or we've chosen to depict them then. In North America, it's difficult. They didn't have any sort of written history. They don't have any ancient buildings that we can look at in that sense that show what the wildlife around them was like. And yet,
Yeah.
the ancient First Nation stories do seem to talk about the hairy men and the forest spirits. So it does seem to be a very, very old legend indeed.
So hopefully that answers your question, Stealth Andy, and keep the questions coming, guys. But as I said, I've got one of my own about one that you books, and that was, I guess, the first question I'll field to you, if you don't mind, Andy, is about the Beasts of Britain.
Yes.
So it obviously, very patriotic, love the Beasts of Britain, but again, I've studied lots of different. Sorry, I guess you've studied a lot of different cryptid encounters, cases, and research. Is there a particular beast or cryptid that you would say is your favorite?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It has to be. It has to be lake monsters. I started as a lake monster guy, and
Right.
I think I'll finish with this one as well. It's just so exciting, and I think it's something to do with the water. It's the depth of the water. It's this hidden aspect, this impenetrable space that we can't get into. I've been to Loch Ness a whole bunch of times, and many of the other lochs as well, and other lakes around Britain that have lake monster stories, and there's even loads of sea serpent stories, or what I would call in many cases itinerant lake monsters of the same type as Nessie, but around our coasts. It's just amazing, and it as an island people, how we cannot be obsessed with the sea and the water in every single aspect of our lives. It surprises me. My wife always jokes that it seems that most people in Britain don't really get that they live on an island. If we've got a sort of a mainland sort of feeling about us and ourselves, and yet there's coast everywhere, 50 miles from everywhere. There's coast almost. It seems, and not 50 miles from everywhere, but there's coast surrounding us, and there's so many stories throughout our history and modern day that show that something inexplicable is inhabiting these watery spaces, and I just love it. I've gone to Loch Ness at night. I've sat next to the loch at night in the dark by myself in pitch blackness for hours, and just thought, wow, it's so pristine, it's so dark here. In fact, if something was to approach me, right up to me, this very moment, I'd have no clue. I'd have no idea, and it's amazing. I just love it. Absolutely love it.
Because that's I used to live right on the cusp of Lake Windermere.
Oh, I think they have a monster allegedly as well. Yeah, absolutely.
But
Bonus.
Bonessie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bonus.
there's a recent account that I believe you commented on as well for that account recently. Is that right?
The one I interviewed somebody about recently was actually one of the very early ones, and that was in 2006. I think it was one of the first ones. There was a photograph sighting made by a photographer, Lyndon Adams. He's a well known in the media. He's a great photographer, and he saw the creature for 15 minutes. And his photos, even though they're at distance, about a mile distant, they still show something really huge and long in the water, swimming about and cavorting. During that whole time, he, as a photographer, he did great work as well. He got the measurements of all of the buildings and bits of land in the background and sized the feather up so you could actually sensibly estimate the length of the creature in view. The part in view is 15 feet. There's nothing in the lake that can grow to that size. There's a great story there, actually, that one I didn't put in my book because I found out about it later. And there was a couple. There's these little sort of motorboats you can hire to go on Lake Windermere. You remember the ones with the little red sort of back, and
Yeah.
you hire the boat and go out on the lake there. And there was a couple, and they went out on the lake, on just a regular day. It wasn't very busy. Weather was bad. Started to rain. So they all got under the canopy, and then suddenly, this huge, they said, thick, dark green eel-like creature, because of its length, swims up alongside them. They could have reached out of the boat and touched the creature, and just kind of sidles alongside the boat for a few minutes and disappears. and they're terrified now. And just looking at that interview
I would be.
with the, I would be too. And I
Mm.
want to see something like this. But in the moment when you realize that's a real creature that has a real option to react independently, as a being to your presence, it's a frightening thing. And it was an amazing sighting to me. They saw it, the creature. It couldn't have been anything else. It couldn't have been a seal. Couldn't have been an eel. Something unknown just came across. And when you listen to the interview with them, they're clearly very rattled but shocked. And they've got no skin in the game. They're not interested in anything to do with cryptozoology or the paranormal. They're just two town girls that went out sailing with their boyfriends for an afternoon for a bit of fun, and saw a monster essentially, which is just awesome in my opinion.
Just yeah, that's a good afternoon.
Yeah, goodbye. I'm sure they didn't go
I
back. I'm sure.
yeah, I've definitely got some other questions to ask you about water monsters, but we've got some interesting questions that have come through from our viewers. Mazabert Bob asks, let's bring that up. Of all the unusual creatures you have researched, which do you think are the most populous in Britain?
Well, it's not exactly, and I'll answer Healing Heart's question in the same answer actually. So it's not a cryptid per se, but it's an out of place animal, which is the British big cats, and that's a phenomenon that, in my opinion, that's clearly been caused by the Dangerous Wild Animals Act that was introduced in 1976, which stipulated um, very stringently and in a very expensive way the kinds of enclosures and room and conditions under which exotic animals needed to be kept and registered. And many people, I mean, people who had farms with maybe they had a pet puma or a melanistic leopard, the black panther that were very popular at that time, many people just let them go. They couldn't afford to keep the animal. They didn't want to kill it or have it put down, and there were no zoos offering to take them off their hands. They had no option. They just let them go. And leopards and pumas, which are the most commonly sighted big cats in the UK, are fantastically well adapted to our environment. And what have we got? 30 million sheep, 5 million deer, 35 million rabbits in the country, and game birds, and so on and on and on and on and on. And the sightings are just too regular. We're clearly seeing their descendants, maybe the descendants of the descendants of the descendants,
Yeah.
46 years later. And it's amazing to me. I think there is now a homegrown population of big cats in the UK, and they're growing year upon year upon year. And because these animals have territorial needs, largely solitary, they just keep spreading out and out and out. And I
Do
think
you
it'll
know
be
if there's
something that's acknowledged. Yeah.
do you know if there's any group or set of people that gather data from farmers about the number of cattle or sheep that
Yeah.
go missing? But then I suppose even that, because a
Mm.
lot of here in the UK, a lot of our cows and sheep are allowed to freely roam across like
Mhm.
more areas, etc., where they hit tragedy, like falling into pits, etc. So I guess it would be hard to quantify, but it would be interesting to look at that statistically, how many live cattle are going missing or unexplained.
There's a difficulty with it. Now, I can't ratify this statistic because I was told it. I never checked it out actually, but I was told by the cat researcher that on average 16,000 sheep are killed every year by dogs. So dog kills. People walking their dogs in the countryside, or their dogs get off the lead and go for a run and kill sheep. Essentially, tear their throats out or whatever they do to them. And I really wonder, out of that, say, approximately 16,000 sheep that are killed by dogs, how many are killed by other animals, like big cats, and just attributed to dogs if the killing isn't witnessed. So I think there is it's a bit of a get out of jail free card, perhaps, but there is room within that number to support quite a large population of these animals. And besides that, I had a great sighting given to me by a farmer in Yorkshire. Don't know the location. He was out in his field baling hay, getting it ready for the winter for the horses in his tractor. And he said he saw a black panther, and it was about He said it was about 3 feet long, but only about a foot and a half high. And he said it was a lot smaller than I expected a cat like that to be. Initially, I thought perhaps he's seen a serval or a savannah cat, but no, he said it was bulky, it was big, but it was a lot smaller than I expected. And some of the breeds are smaller. I also wondered if there was a chance that there could be, smaller offspring due to the environment or the conditions. I don't know how that would be affected. And yet he was convinced. He just called me up. Somebody said I should talk to you about these creatures. Another lady got in touch with me in, it's near here actually, in Hampshire, and she had gone to a farm at night to pick up a hay consignment. She's a horse breeder to feed her horses. She pulled in at 9 o'clock at night, November, I think it was 2017, 2018, and parked a Range Rover, gone off to get the hay. It's one of these places where you have a contract and you just go in. There's nobody there. You pick it up and you head off. And as she was coming back to shut the gate before they left, her and her colleague saw a black panther, a male. They saw it clear enough to see that it was male. It was large, really heavy set, about waist high. Apparently she was 5'8", sauntering towards them, licking its lips, and just, as it got about 10, 20 feet away from them, it wandered off into a hedge. And she also contacted me in the same light, no skin in the game, to say, I've just seen the Black Panther. Has there been an escape? Somebody said I should talk to you about it. I said, no, it's native. It's a native Black Panther. It lives here. It was born here. It's part of our environment. And I think in 20 or 30 years, they'll be like gray squirrels. We'll never know, or our descendants will never know that they weren't here once upon a time. It'll just be a natural part of the environment.
Excellent. Well, that's a very, very awesome answer. And hopefully that answered not only Mazza McBob's question, but also Healing Heart and Daniel Godwin, who was also asking about, can you point him in the direction of the best case video or photo of big cats being here in the UK? But I think you've solidly answered that with that response, given plenty of examples there. So thank you, Andy.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess I did have a question for you about your other book, The Beasts of the World. It does throw us a little bit back to the Wildman subject, but what I adored about that book was that it was it's very rare. I've been interested in the hairy man subject for probably about 4 years now. Two of those years have been on YouTube and sharing research and content on YouTube. But it's very rare when I've come on board to the subject that you find somewhere where someone is talking about all the different areas, the multitude of wild men possibilities or theories, because usually people will sit in a very specific lane that they either believe in Yeti or they believe in Sasquatch or they but doing the research for that book, did you find yourself gravitating towards a particular area of the phenomena? Because I know I did, and I was quite surprised where it pulled me to.
Not particularly. I mean, the reason I started writing that as the first book in the series. So just to recap briefly, the Beasts of the World series, it's a 7-part series. Number 2 is on the way, and covering different types of cryptids in one category. So I thought, well, let's do hairy hominids first. I thought, but then I called it hairy humanoids because some of the types were a little bit vague. So I wanted to be as ambiguous as possible to fit them in. But what I found there was actually, you know what? This is not just my own idea. It's one that existed before. It's not just the man-ape type that we have in North America, like the Bigfoot, this 7 to 9 foot tall, large hominoid. It's bipedal. It has this similar footprint to humans, except it has that strange arch in the middle they call the mid-tarsal ridge. That seems to show that the foot can sort of clasp onto the things it's walking over, I would imagine, branches and things like that. It's not only that type that exists. In Europe and West Asia, there seems to be a wild man type, a caveman-like type, almost like a Neanderthal, or what we imagine a Neanderthal to look like. Still hair covered, still large, but 5 to 7 feet in height this time, and having this distinct head hair to the hair on its body, sometimes even wearing, some rags and bits of clothing, and on again to the Yeti, which seems more like a relic ape, or the skunk ape, which seems to be a similar type. And then I found little feet. This Australia has a good example of the Junjidi, which is they call the little fella. The Yowie they call the big fella, and so on and so forth. Even upright monkey monsters I found, which seem to be a strange kind of creature, like a monkey, has a tail, but it's huge. It's 5 to 6 feet tall and really fierce, and it even goes on further than that. And I thought, well, these have got to be classified differently. If I report these as Bigfoot in every single area of the world, well, that's not exactly honest. We're looking at variations of a species, or at least of a type, perhaps in the way that, a polar bear and a black bear and a grizzly bear are all bears, and a panda, they're all bears. Anybody seeing one, if he was familiar with the other, could see that that's a bear. And yet they are very different to one another, and in their behavior, in their requirements regarding habitat and diet, and in their behavior as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a long and exhaustive subject if you start really delving into it from a global perspective, and it is quite surprising how dynamically different those reports, those accounts, the behaviors, the size, the descriptions, how much they vary. It's quite surprising.
It really is, and I mean, I'm not to labor it too much. I know we've spoken a lot about hominoids, but it's even in the book. I chose a few examples from every category. I could have filled it. We could have done 1,000 pages. There were so many different types of examples within those categories. And I thought, well, it's got to stop somewhere. It's got to be readable. Nobody's going to want 1,000-page book on hominoids, hominids. Sorry, but it's just it's just
You'd be
fascinating to
surprised.
me as a first chapter. Yeah, but I'm sure somebody would read it. But I'm suffering with this problem with the new book as well. I'm already on 600 pages, and I've got to somehow condense it into a readable thing. It's yes, it's exciting, but it's got to be it's got to be readable. It's got to be an overview, and hopefully, if people get it and buy it, and there is an audio book, by the way, plugging again for both the books, you'll get to enjoy it in one of those ways.
Is that audio book read by you?
No, it's not. Some people have tried to get me to read it, but I think what I've realized is, I did a few practice sessions, is that it's all very well, presenting and doing different things, but being a narrator is a specific skill. It's a specific skill, and one I don't have any experience in. And I actually chose a guy called Jonathan Rufus Welsh, an English guy, who narrates awesomely, really wonderfully. And I think that the comments I gave him on his page was, and on the books, was I couldn't have said it better myself. So I couldn't have. He's really, really great. I'd love to narrate. I don't think I have the skill set to do it just yet.
Okay. I said to you that I had some other questions about sea monsters, because I was going through some of your Beasts of Britain blog, and I came across, funny enough, a blog from an account in 2015 with a crocodile.
Oh, the Plymouth Crocodile.
Off the coast of. Yes, I've got a picture to share.
Yes.
I've pulled the picture down, so I'll just bring that up a minute.
Yeah.
Just for everybody that's watching. Hold on, I need to open it up first.
And I will. I'll make sure I've got the details in front of me.
Yeah, bear with me a second. I don't think it's going to work. That's what I had to do first, is open it properly. I just want to zoom in because it's quite a small picture.
Oh, here it is. Okay, great.
You'll probably get to the picture before I do. It's
You
very
know, I
elegant.
mean, yeah, okay.
So that should be coming up on the screen now. So hopefully you guys at home can see this one. We'll come back to your questions in just a moment. I just got this one that I wanted to ask Andy whilst we're on the subject of sea monsters. So yeah, this was in 2015. And I thought it was interesting because just last month there was quite a lot of noise about an
Oh,
incident in
yes.
Bradford.
Yes.
Since this one was something that you had commented on and featured, I just wondered whether you had looked into the incident in Bradford.
In Bempton, near Bempton. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I have, and I did post it. So I think that the creature observed in this particular case, the Plymouth crocodile, was definitely credible in some respects. It was observed and photographed by, thankfully, again, a university technician had a telephoto lens with him, so this is the reason the pictures are so good. And he saw it. He saw it appearing about the same length of a boat, seemed to be sort of pockmarked or have a ridgeback in some way. It was looking like a huge crocodile to him, but I think that's something he's pulling from his mental library. Doesn't look like a crocodile, but he couldn't really think of anything else to to put it in that to compare it to. Now he describes it, and everybody who saw it describes it moving against the current and circling around as well. So we're definitely looking at something that was animate in some way, whether it was real, whether it was mistaken identity or not. We're looking at an animate creature that was estimated at being 20 feet long, and also had a boat in the foreground to measure against. So that's a very credible sighting, whatever it turned out to be. And there are lots of other sightings of sea monsters. I mean, it isn't really too far from there to get to the famous Morgower sighting of 1975 in Pendennis Point in Cornwall. We're in the same relative area. However, the recent Bempton sighting of the filmed sighting of crocodiles swimming in the sea off there, I think is a ruse. And I think it's a ruse for a very good point. One, the footage is cut off after about 6 seconds. So you've got some huge crocodilian animals swimming in the sea just off Bempton, the Bempton Cliffs, and yet you film it for 6 seconds and then stop. This is an amazing creature you're seeing here for the first time. And I think the reason it stopped is for one of two reasons. Either one, they were filming whales of some kind, perhaps pilot whales or something else similar. Or two, and this is really my strong suspicion, they're rocks. What she's captured there are rocks. And you can see the texture, this bumpy texture. It's almost if the waves are breaking over. And it's only really the movement of the camera that makes it seem like the thing in the focus is moving itself. I don't think it's moving at all. I would love to get up there and get some footage of that area, see if I can spot those rocks again at the right time.
Yeah. There was something about that particular case that sort of set off a little bit of alarm bells for me, and that was that I think it was about a week later, the same person said that they went back to that location and filmed again, or they had a better version of another video that they recorded on another phone, or and that just started, I think, hurting the credibility of that one in particular.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting to me that, when I heard about that situation in where did you mention it was? Because I thought it was Bradford, but
I think that one
Benton
was in
Cliffs.
yeah,
Benton
I think it
Cliffs.
was just off the Bempton Cliffs. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, I know that crocodiles can exist in seawater, but I'd never heard about crocodiles before. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
I'm reading through your blog, and back in 2015, there was another crocodile. So I thought I'd ask you about it. But going back to where we were talking about your narration of your audiobook, and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I've put all the links in the description to Andy's link tree, so you can go and check out his full profile for all of his podcasts and all of his upcoming conference and lecturing dates and anything really. That's a great portal that you use there, Andy, to connect everybody to everything you do. And I think everybody that goes and checks that out will be aghast at how much detail Andy goes into. I mean, it's exhaustive. I mean, one of the first questions I was going to ask you, but I decided to bypass it, was that given the extent of the detail and the attention that you've got to this subject matter, I'm presuming that this is a fully fledged career for you, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, I'm trying. I mean, I do still work. I am trying, and in the time, the point when I, you know, used all my savings this first few years to do it free of work has finished. We're really hoping that we sell the series. I mean, I have a publisher. I'm with Hanger One Publishing, who are really great. If anybody wants to check them out, hangeronepublishing.com. And there's lots of other authors on their site who are really, really great. Um, so that's nice. But at the moment, we're still at that hobby side of things.
Well,
I'm trying to balance young family plus work, plus finishing a book and pitching a series right now, and I don't really sleep.
Well,
But
that's amazing because yeah, the detail and how much information you've got on there, and the different platforms that you reach out to, just everything you can think of, and so yeah, it's amazing. And so as I mentioned, I've put the links in the description to that and to and Andy's YouTube channel, Beast of Britain, where you can go and subscribe. So please, if you're enjoying what Andy's talking about this evening and want to find out more, please go and check that out. So yeah, going back to what I was saying, Mazza, but Bob was saying that she loves your accent though, and it would sound awesome on an audio book.
Oh, thank you.
Healing Heart, Healing Heart has chimed in saying great whites have been spotted off UK coast. May have been a shark that had been beat up, chewed up. She said, I only say that because it looks like a great white fin. I think she's referring to the picture that we were sharing. I don't know if you saw that come up on your screen. I was sharing the picture of
the
from
Plymouth
Plymouth
Crocodile. Yeah. Perhaps, I mean, it could have been, it could have been a seal, perhaps who'd been damaged by a propeller, a boat propeller. This is very possible. It was really, I mean, it wasn't really, and there's always the possibility, and this has to be the bottom line. Some of these pictures and things do sell papers occasionally. There's always the possibility, as with the Bempton Cliff crocodiles, that somebody just got, a funny, creature-esque looking picture and said, well, I'm sure the story will follow and sell well once it does the rounds. That could happen as well. I always believe everybody that gives me a sighting at face value, because I think that's the respectful thing to do. But I still do my due diligence, and I've been fooled on more than one occasion. And I think, it's just part of the joy of figuring out, what's real and what's not in this genre. But
that's why the research is important, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's my heartfelt desire and hope that there are some animals out there to find, and I would like to be one of the lucky ones to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, just talking to you, I think here on the Vault, we've worked a lot with Daniel Godwin. He was with us earlier on, or might still be with us now. Let us know if you're still with us, Daniel. As I mentioned to you off air, Ben from the 401 Files, and
oh yes, I love Ben.
We try and assign ourselves to with people that are very much of the ilk that say it as it is, don't dramatize it. If you found evidence that doesn't support it, share it. It's always important to the onward process, and it makes it much more credible and believable. So when someone like yourself comes on a show like this and says something and says, well, I don't think there's much to that, like we were just talking about the Benton Cliff alligators or crocodiles, and but then when you say, no, I think there is a lot to this, then it carries a lot of weight, which is fantastic. So
absolutely, and I think in this genre, just as a one little soundbite before finishing, you've got to be genuine with your career, especially because if you fake it, you'll break it. So as soon as you fake it and people find out, that's it, you're out forever. Nobody will ever believe you again. And in fact, I don't even believe I've got the right to believe it. It's just about the investigation and presenting the findings, and that's as far as my bit should go.
Mm. Yeah. Excellent. So, oh, Daniel is still here with us. He says, I'm still here, G. So, yeah, great to have you on board, Daniel. So, yeah, my next question that I had is I know that you're all about cryptids when it comes to your front facing expertise, but is there other areas of the paranormal or the mysterious that you have a keen interest in? And if there are, what stands out as your biggest keen interest?
My other really big interest is actually history. It's poignant key points in history that intersect with one another and have created in different parts of the world simultaneously, although apart from one another, created the world that we live in today. And I love that aspect of finding out, maybe that, you know, um, metalworking was created here at the same time as gunpowder was found over there. At the same time as these guys were building huts, those guys were building colosseums, and kind of seeing it as a Google Maps view of the world of events all at once. You're just looking at this plain chessboard of the world, and yet there's all these different, huge, poignant parts of history taking place all at once. I love that. I love history. I'm not really into the ghost thing per se, but I do enjoy it from a skeptical point of view. I like looking at the facts of when, especially when people are presenting scientific or at least theoretically plausible arguments for it. I used to love the whole pinhole camera explanation for rematerializing ghosts, those that walk a path, like like the headless lady of this castle or the grey man of that castle that walk a certain route. And I think there was a theory that um, the environment, the building itself, was almost like a pinhole camera recording that scene when atmospheric conditions were viable, and then replaying it in the future every time those atmospheric conditions are present again. And that's why people were seeing these ghosts or these apparitions walking a certain route. It's not my theory, but I was always kind of enamored by that and thought, wow, wouldn't that be a great explanation for this thing?
Yeah, I need to get some permission to return to Bury Pomeroy. I don't know if you've ever heard of, it's quite a reported
Yeah,
haunted location here in the UK, and it's just up the road from
yeah,
where I am. But that's had some very, for me, what you were saying there was basically a lot of pareidolia and that location is incredibly unsettling,
yeah.
but it's unsettling because there's all these different environmental and structural kind of oddities that create a lot of crazy stuff that can play around with the senses, play
Mm.
around with the eyes. Like there's one particular window that you can look at, and it usually looks, if you look at it from a certain angle, it looks like there's a white lady stood in it because
Uh,
of where that open window, which is now not got any glass in it and it's just stone ruin, the way it catches the back night sky at a certain
got
angle,
it.
especially when the moon, you
Yeah,
know. So yeah, it's very it's very interesting to you say that, because within all the areas of paranormal, supernatural, mysterious, it is the hauntings and ghosts that I'm the least versed on, or the least drawn
same,
to.
exactly same.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed that. I don't think I was stalking you. I was going through your profile and looking at your favorite films, because I was really shocked and surprised at how many of your favorite films sit in my favorite film list
Oh,
as well.
oh, do I have favorite
And
films on there?
yeah, Color
Oh,
Purple, uh,
oh wow,
um,
yeah.
Close Encounters of the Third
I
Kind,
mean, yeah,
Jaws.
yeah, Jaws I watch every month, so
Yeah,
so every single
yeah.
month.
I
I
recently
mean,
went and watched it in 3D.
I
But
wanted to. So I live in London, so I'm near to London, and the IMAX Waterloo had it, and I caught COVID, and so I couldn't go out, and
uh,
it's gone now. It's not there anymore, and I was I just missed it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So if it ever comes up again, I highly recommend to check it out. It was really really great. It
Oh,
was very
I'm so gutted.
it was very clever what they did with it. Actually, I was just really surprised.
Yeah.
So going back to some of our viewers, got two great questions that have come up.
Mm.
Just going to share Healing Hearts first, and then we'll get to Daniel's.
Oh, yes.
Have you found any truth in the reports of giants from long ago?
Um, in truth, I mean, most of those giant reports come from the Geoffrey of Monmouth book, written in the 12th century, which is it Richard and Britannia? I can't remember. Sorry, the name of the book now. I did have it on the tip of my tongue. It came up recently because there was reports of a giant sighting in Holcombe, in Norfolk, on the beach, and an anonymous witness had claimed to have seen a 15-foot tall giant watching him in the sand dunes when he went for a pee. And this made the papers later because a dog walker then found two very large, four-toed, crudely made footprints that were clearly being cut into the sand. I'm guessing by the anonymous witness, by the way, and that made the papers. So, and that brought up. I did a little article on it for the Daily Star, and that brought up the whole history of giants again. Of course, there's the giant Gog Magog, who was the giant who was allegedly the last of the race of giants of Albion. This is what this island used to be called. That was captured, and this is partially folklore now. It appears in Geoffrey of Monmouth's book in the 12th century by Brutus of Troy, one of the refugees from the destruction of Troy, who travelled across the ocean and found the British Isles and found a tribe of giants living there and destroyed them, taken over the island and kept one as a sort of a token, I suppose, who was eventually killed by one of his generals in a sort of a hand-to-hand battle.
Was that
I'm
when
just
do they depict that in the film with when they bring the big guy into who looks a bit like Goliath to fight Brad Pitt?
Oh yeah, well no, yeah, exactly. In a way, but I mean, there's
I
stories
don't know
of
if they were
gigantic
leaning
people.
towards that in that.
Well, I think that's more to do with stories of giants all over the world from those times. So of course there was the sons of Anak in the Middle East. Anak in Hebrew means giant, so the Anakim would have been giants, at least giant in stature. Goliath and his brothers were all supposed to be 9 footers, and I suppose that's not really out of the realms of possibility if you look at Robert Wadlow, the the young man who died young but who had gigantism and who
Yeah, yeah.
died at 8 foot 11 inches tall when he was 19 years old. So there's always the possibility of it, I suppose. As to whether these were sort of supernatural things, I just think it was a genetic abnormality that affects people as much as dwarfism does from time to time, and in close knit communities that would have been common to almost every part of the world up until recent, more international times. The likelihood of that gigantism spreading down through generations would have been higher than they would be
Mm.
today.
It's a very interesting point that you make there that I've never really considered when people start talking about giants, but there have been people, very few and far between, but we know and we have evidence of a mutation of sorts that they've grown to, as you said,
Mm.
Robert. Was it Wadlow?
Wadlow or Wadlow, I think, yeah,
Yeah,
in the US, he was 8 foot 11.
yeah, interesting. Never really thought about that, making that comparison, because again, throughout any culture and history, there could have been, the odd mutation that's then supplied a lot of the
Mhm.
myth around giants, right? So yeah. Going to Daniel's question. Oh, it was less of a question. I don't know.
Ah,
Um,
that was
I'm not.
about the ghost theory, the stone tape theory. That's what he's talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with that. So I don't know if what the actual question is there. Maybe he's asking you, what's your opinion of the stone
Um,
tape theory?
I think he's confirming that what I was talking about was the stone tape theory, with the
Ah,
reproduction of ghostly walkers, that walking a route that I didn't know what the theory was called. It was just when I overheard somewhere and thought was interesting. I think, Daniel, I think it is the stone tape theory, and it's rang true to me. Before we understood photography, we create this little box in school, and you do the pinhole camera, get the reflective paper, and you recreate the conditions to capture an image that is before you. And yet, why couldn't a room or the composite parts of a room, something that is in its makeup, the stone, for example, even the atmospheric conditions, not capture an image and replay it when those conditions are reproduced? Scientifically, it sounds impossible, but maybe there's something in it.
Well, it's, I mean, we've covered a lot of content and a lot of different
Loved it.
theories
Yeah, thank you.
already on this session. I know that the beginning of the session was quite heavy on wild men and Bigfoot, but I guess, that is, especially in modern times, quite an overpowering subject within the area of cryptid. I think you would agree with that, Andy. It gets, it's had a lot
Absolutely.
of, it's building a lot of momentum. But we were chatting off air before we came on tonight, and I was saying to Andy, he's now part of the Vault family. Anybody who comes on to the Vault sessions, is obviously, the door is always open and welcome, and we're going to really obviously extend that to Andy, and he can drop back and give us an update on how things are going with him. And you were mentioning that you've got a book, a new book coming up, hopefully, that's going to be ready by, was it Christmas, by December?
I hope before Christmas. It's a Beast of the World Volume 2, Water Monsters. That's the next volume I'm dealing with, and I hope so. I'm really trying to get it done on time. It might be January, if not January sales, perhaps. But yeah, I would like it to be ready before Christmas. It's just looking a bit sort of tough at the moment. So yes, I will work really hard and try to get it done in time.
Well, you can always come back and give us an update and give the book a plug as well. And it would be great for me to, and I'm sure the guys here at the Vault will have plenty more questions now that we've got used to who Andy McGrath is. And so I'm sure they'll have more questions for you next time as well. But thank you, everybody that's asked Andy questions this evening. Hope you've enjoyed chatting with Andy. I've absolutely adored having you here with us on the Vault. I'm going to be ending the live stream shortly, guys, so I just want to say a big thank you for joining us this evening. The next live Vault sessions will be the first Tuesday of November. There won't be any Vault sessions throughout December for obvious reasons, but there will be one coming up in the first Tuesday of November and the third Tuesday of November. And keep an eye out on the channel for updates on who's going to be joining us next time in the Vault sessions. Andy, if I can ask you to stick around once I stop the live show so we can have a bit of another chat off air, that would be awesome. But for now, guys, thank you again for joining and supporting. Make sure before we check out that you've liked the stream, and we'll see you next time here on the Vault sessions. Thank you, guys.